Good evening. It's 7 o'clock and we have a very full and exciting agenda this evening, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Judy Zornbrecher. I'm the Voter Service Chair for the League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle. And I'd like to welcome everyone tonight, everyone in the audience, all the people who volunteered, and of course the candidates for being here this evening. The League of Women Voters of Concord and Carlisle and the League of Women Voters of Acton area are the co-sponsors of this event. The purpose of the forum is to hear directly from the candidates their points of view on a number of key topics that we have solicited questions from in either the audience, which you'll learn about tonight, and also from our local leagues. So you get to hear directly from the candidates. We have 3 segments. We're all focused on the state legislature races in our area. The first one is for the 14th Middlesex District, for the House seat there. The second segment, which will start at 7:30, is for the Middlesex and Worcester District for the State Senate. And the third segment, which will start at 8:15, is for the 37th Middlesex House District. The goal of our forums are to be fair, inclusive, respectful, and informative. And in that respect, we invited all the candidates who qualified and are on November 6th general election ballot, and all of them agreed to attend tonight, so that was very exciting. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, multi-issue grassroots organization that encourages informed and active participation in local, state, and national government. And the League develops positions on issues that does not support or oppose candidates or political parties. It is a long tradition of providing important voter services such as this forum this evening. The forum will be videotaped by ActonTV. In fact, I found out that it is also being streamed live on Facebook by ActonTV. So if you have friends at home who can't make it, you may want to send them a little message and let them know they can tune in. It'll also be available on ActonTV as soon as we get it loaded up, and we will also make it available to other local public access channels, such as in Concord, like the Minuteman Media Network, and we'll put links on the Facebook pages and the websites of the local league and the state league. And we'll provide also a link to all the candidates, and if they so choose, they can put it up, the links up on their websites. So it'll be widely available for people to view afterwards. We do ask that everyone turn off or silence their cell phones so we don't have any interruptions in that respect. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator this evening. It's Patti Muldoon. She's a longtime moderator and very busy this time of year, so we're very pleased that she was able to join us tonight. She is the former Justice Specialist for the Massachusetts League of Women Voters and is current Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Arlington. With that, I'll turn the evening over to Patti. Patti?
Good evening, everyone. Delighted to join you from the far reaches of Arlington. We always try to have very neutral moderators, so I'm not voting in your election. So I just want to mention that the candidates have both asked that we use their first names, so I want to mention that for this debate. And to let you know that I'm going to go through the rules 3 times because basically we have 3 completely different segments. So you will get to hear this more than once. Each candidate is only given 30 seconds for their opening statement, and they get a full minute to close, but 90 seconds to answer your questions. So if you do have questions, raise your hand, and we'll do our best to include them. I might allow a rebuttal if needed, or possibly a follow-up question. Timers are in the front, and our candidates are prepared for that. And I'd like to introduce the candidates for the 14th Middlesex District. Tammy Govea is from Acton, and she's the Democratic nominee for this seat. Danny Factor is from Acton, and he is the Green Rainbow Party nominee for the seat. So let us begin with their opening statements, and we basically flipped a coin to see who starts, and that will be Tammy. Will you start, please?
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tammy Govea, and I am running for state representative because I believe that we have the power to fix the challenges our state faces if we're working together, listening to each other, and respecting each other. As a public health social worker and progressive Democrat, I've dedicated my career to solving the problems that families face in their everyday lives. As your state representative, I will bring your voice to the legislative process to fight for policies to ensure that everybody has what they need to thrive in our state. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight.
Thank you. And next, Danny Factor. Danny?
Hi, everybody. I'm Danny Factor. I'm the Green Party candidate for state representative. I'm a public interest attorney and an activist, and I'm running because so many of you, I know, feel that there's an urgent need to stop climate change and also to reach out to people in our community who are most vulnerable. But I've also listened to the growing number of independents who are now a majority in Massachusetts who are sick and tired of a corporate-run two-party system where the best bills don't even get voted on. And I think that change can only come from an elected official independent of the two-party system.
Thank you. And we'll begin with our questions, beginning with Danny. Same questions for both candidates. On what committees do you want to serve if elected, and why? 90 seconds.
Chief responsibility, I think that we all have, is to do something urgently about our climate emergency. And while there are other committees that I would be interested in serving on, I think climate right now has to be our top priority. We have to recognize that climate change is our greatest threat. We need an emergency plan to halt climate change. And what is interesting is that the same legislation that can keep us from using fossil fuels will also create hundreds and thousands of green, safe living wage jobs in Massachusetts. There's absolutely no reason why we can't get to 100% clean, renewable energy. We must by 2030, and also end poverty at the same time. We can end homelessness, we have the will, we can end poverty, and it can all be done through what's called a Green New Deal, which means creating these jobs, and there's a funding plan that can be put in place to fund it as well. It is going to mean strong measures. It's going to mean a ban on all fossil fuel infrastructures in Massachusetts, and it's going to mean ending corporate subsidies and shifting the tax burden to polluters and high-end consumers as well. But it is urgently needed. Our lives depend on it.
Thank you. Tammy, which committee would you like to serve on?
The main committee that I would like to put in to serve on is the Transportation Committee. I hear over and over and over again from folks across the district and across the state how challenging it is to get from point A to point B in our state, whether you're trying to take public transportation or get into your car and just drive 20 miles down the road. I also hear over and over again about the concerns with the Rotary and the challenges with navigating the Rotary and the clogged roadways on Route 2. I'd like to see us figure out ways to get people out of their cars and onto more public transportation, but that requires major investments that we have not been really willing to make in our state. We need to have a shift in the way that we're thinking about how we make investments in transportation. Right now we have this mindset that really is the majority mindset that roads and bridges will pay for. I know we have crumbling infrastructure and we still have to make more investments in roads and bridges for safety reasons, but we don't have that same mindset around public transit. We expect public transit to pay for itself, and we have to start looking at public transit as a common good that's critically important to making sure that people can get from point A to point B, get their kids to school, get themselves to work and back in an easy fashion. I hear too many people who are sitting in traffic for an hour and a half. That's an hour and a half each way that they're spending in traffic, time that they could use spending with their children reading, exercising, volunteering in their community. So transportation is the committee that I would seek to sit on to solve a lot of the state's problems. Thank you.
And beginning with you again, Tammy. What steps, if any, should the legislature take to improve the integrity and safety of the state's natural gas infrastructure and distribution system?
Well, I think there's a short-term focus embedded in this question and also a long-term. The short-term is we need to hold corporate corporations accountable for maintaining the infrastructure that they are making, millions of dollars off of from consumers. We also need to hold them accountable for the leaks that happen pretty naturally, and the fact that there are hundreds of leaks all across this state. Just yesterday, I was outside my condo, and National Grid was walking around because there was a leak that they had just found that day. So we do need to hold corporations accountable for ensuring the safety of the lines, replacing the ones that are outdated and that are leaking to make sure that we're staying safe and that there aren't gas explosions. But we also need to be looking at long-term, how to get off of our addiction and dependence on fossil fuels and moving towards more renewable energy sources, because those renewable energy sources are much safer for our health and safety, they're much safer for everyday use, and they're much safer for our environment. We want to make sure that we have a planet that is sustainable for generations far into the future, and continuing to invest in pipelines and natural gas is not the way to go.
Thank you. Danny, same thing. What steps should the legislature take to improve the state's natural gas distribution system?
Well, of course, we need to fix the gas leaks, and this is something which is of a critical need in our district as well, and it's unacceptable. But the truth is that natural gas is, first of all, it's fracked gas. So what we're doing by using natural gas is we're supporting the fracking industry around the United States, which is causing immeasurable harm in our nation. It's also harmful because of the explosions as well, but perhaps the most harm that it causes is it is 40 times more potent when it is leaked out in its raw form, even than oil and coal. And it's really been a lie that's been spread by the fossil fuel industry that natural gas is some sort of safe bridge to the future. It's not. It's a toxic, dangerous gas. It's methane, that's what it is. And we need to get off of it as quick as possible. And that's why when I talk about a ban on fossil fuel infrastructure, one of the things as one of the directors of the organization Green Acton that we're doing is we're asking our Board of Selectmen when they approve new gas lines to houses, we need to stop the pipelines, but we also need to stop the smaller lines as well, and there's no reason that that can't be done statewide.
Thank you. I'm just going to offer you a follow-up to that, 30 seconds. What steps can the state legislature take on this issue? And we'll start back with Tammy again.
Well, first of all, we need to hold Columbia Gas accountable for what happened in Andover, Lawrence, and North Andover. And that means making sure that they're reimbursing everybody for the losses in wages, because so many small businesses have been impacted greatly in the area. And we need to make sure that they're reimbursing folks for the fact that their lives have been incredibly disrupted for too long of a period of time. So those are the steps that the legislature ought to do, is make sure that Columbia Gas and other companies like them are held accountable.
Danny?
I would initiate 3 bills. One, I would end private industry's involvement in fossil fuels in general. Our utilities should go back to being public the way they were when Tammy and I were kids. Second, divest all state investments from fossil fuel industry. And then third, a ban on all fossil fuel infrastructure in Massachusetts.
Thank you. Moving on, beginning back with Danny. What legislation would you support to improve the affordability of housing in the state, and specifically in your district?
So I think when we talk about affordable housing, we need to talk about the priority of where the public necessity is. And right now, we're dealing with an outrage, particularly for people in the lowest income bracket. We're talking about waits of more than 5 years on public housing waiting lists just for residents who live in town. If, God forbid, you're out of town, your wait may be 10 years or more. So if you look at the amount of funding that has gone gone towards housing authorities in the last 15 years, it is lower than it was 15 years ago, which is unacceptable. We're doing a lot on middle-income housing right now, what is called 40B, but we need to focus more on the lower income brackets. I'm talking about people at 30% of the median income or less. The wait lists are unacceptable. I work as a public interest attorney with that community. I see people become homeless. I see people with health issues out on the streets. The funding is there. We can fund this very easily through not only ending corporate subsidies and shifting the tax burden to polluters, but shifting the tax burden to high-end consumers, shifting the tax burden to carbon emitters. We have a responsibility to take care of our most vulnerable people. So when it comes to public housing, I would particularly focus on the income bracket of 30% of median and less.
Tammy?
So I've been a public health social worker my whole career, and housing is a fundamental thing that everybody has to have in order to thrive, that everybody needs in order to thrive. And we need really humane, affordable housing in our state. It ensures a strong, safe community and ensures our economic viability. We were about 108,000 units short of what we need to house everybody adequately in the state of Massachusetts. And I hear stories from seniors who are really worried and grappling with trying to stay in their own home and stay in their community that they've lived in their whole lives. I hear from young people who are living at home, they're 26, 28, 30 years old, who cannot afford to go out and live on their own and are living at home with their families. And we need bold action. We need multiple ways to get at this problem. Increasing the living wage, or achieving a living wage is certainly one way to ensure that people can afford housing, but we also need to redouble our efforts on building affordable and different kinds of quality housing and housing people differently. I would fight to make sure that we're starting to really build housing with a mind towards access to other amenities in the community, so you can walk to your grocery store, so you can walk to a public transit station, so you can get to a job or get your kids to school. And it's really important that we're thinking holistically about the issue of housing. So as a state rep, I will bring people together to work on this issue, and I'll also look at ways to tax people differently so that if you're buying $1 million home, you get a certain tax, and that tax goes into a fund. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to remind the audience again, you have the opportunity to write a question down. If you need a pencil or if you've gotten one finished, just raise your hand and someone will come and pick it up. Beginning with Danny. The Massachusetts Legislature has exempted itself from the state's public record laws. What steps should the legislature take now to make its proceedings and decision-making processes more transparent?
Well, we have a long way to go, and it's really part of the reason, that I'm running. We have basically two corporate-run parties, and one of them in particular that has 80% of the state legislature. They have a veto-proof majority, so they can pass any bill they want, but they're passing a lot of bills to protect themselves and not to protect us. So if we're talking about making ourselves more transparent and accountable in government, it means not only opening up public records, it means reforming our election system to advance a multi-party political system that represents a diversity of views. That means instituting a ranked choice voting so people can actually vote their values and not have to make compromises. We have to end the scourge of money in politics by instituting a complete public financing of campaigns. We have to assert once and for all, corporations are not people and money is not speech. We need to we need to enact term limits so people don't sit in a position like Bill Galvin for 25 years as our Secretary of State, who's supposed to be reforming the system and isn't. We need to end the shame of unopposed elections. Massachusetts leads the nation in that. And finally, we have to expand open meeting law to the State House itself. Our towns live by those transparency rules. Our State House should also.
Tammy.
I've seen the gridlock firsthand up on Beacon Hill. I was a lobbyist against big tobacco, and I've seen over and over and over again how decisions get made behind closed doors and are not made out in the public in front of everybody if you're sitting up in the gallery watching the House and Senate proceedings going on. And so one of the first things, and I've already taken a transparency pledge to stand for roll call votes, and that's one of the major things that I will commit to doing as state representative, is standing for roll call votes. And what that means is it will require an actual vote, so everybody has to say what their vote is on a particular bill. So often, bills that are passed up at the State House are done on just on a basic voice vote or a regular vote. You don't have to stand up and say aye or nay. And so standing up for roll call votes is one important way to increase transparency, because then you as the voters will know how I or other state representatives voted on a particular issue. Right now, state representatives are able to hide behind those closed doors in those proceedings. So that's one critical step to ensuring transparency. The other things that I think are critically important are making sure that we are leveling the playing field so that everyday folks can have an influence on state legislation, and it's not just corporate lobbyists and corporate influence that wins out the day. Thank you.
Thank you. And stay with the mic. What actions do you want the legislature to take to address the opioid crisis?
Yeah, so 10 years ago, when I was living in Lowell, I started the Roundtable on Substance Abuse Prevention focused on the opioid crisis. And as you know, it's really grown into a real major problem that's impacted every single community throughout our state. So to address the opioid crisis, we need both short-term and long-term policies and programs, because this is a very complex problem that's going to take major investments, including single-payer health care, so that we can make sure that people are getting access to the treatment and the recovery services that they need. We need to invest in accurate, reliable prevention programming for our young people to make sure that they're not starting to use substances in the first place. And we need to beef up our mental health services to make sure that if people are stressed out or depressed, that they get the support that they need. And we need to make sure that we're not throwing people in jail for an addiction. Addiction is a health issue. We need to be treating it as a health issue and not criminalizing people for the challenges that they face. I've heard over and over again across the district and across the state how heartbreaking of an issue this is, and how many people have lost lives of children, parents, and loved ones to this crisis. It's really important that we work together, and I will continue to bring people together to work on addressing this issue, because it is a complex issue and it's going to take a lot of people from different perspectives coming together to solve it. Thank you.
Danny.
Tammy makes some very good points about what we need to do, and I want to focus on another, aspect of this as well. So I very much respect Tammy's background in public health. Just so you know, Tammy and I are friendly. We've worked together, on many issues as well, and I have a heck of a lot of respect for her in this field. I want to focus on an aspect of this that is part of the cause and is also, maybe, injuring our ability to solve the problem as well, and that is the corporate aspect of opioid addiction and what solved this, what caused the problem in the first place. We have let the medical industry go wild in deregulating them and allowing them to, advertise and to, basically force vulnerable people into addiction. And it's wrong, and there are reforms that we can put in place to stop this. Healthcare is a human right. It should never be seen as a commodity, and we've gotten used to the fact that healthcare and medicine is something that you advertise, it's something that you sell, and then this is compounded by the problem of the corporatization of our hospital industry, as well. So that needs to be much more strongly regulated and moving back to hospitals that are public and owned by the people.
Thank you. Give me 1 sec while I read the questions. Okay. Good questions. We have another question on climate change. in addition to wanting to know specific bills that you'd support to improve our climate disruption concerns, what will you do, if elected, to meet the goal of keeping the temperature rise to less than 2 degrees centigrade? So we are coming back to that, and I would like to ask Tammy to speak first, please.
Thank you. It's a great question. I think the number one thing that we need to do is pass carbon pricing. We need to be really paying for, right now, the way that we are polluting our environment and the way that we have been polluting it for a very long time. That's been exacerbating and increasing the temperature of our planet. We need to be fighting every single day to make sure that we have a sustainable planet for future generations. I have 2 children. I'm desperately worried about what the future holds for them in so many ways, and the climate crisis is a major concern and something that ought to be addressed. In addition to carbon pricing, which we know scientists say is going to be the most effective way to reduce the rising temperature, is passing more opportunities for people to access renewable energy. We have the technology now. We have electric cars. We have solar panels and other ways to have, zero emissions. The problem is so many people cannot afford those. And so many people live in multi-unit dwellings or in other places where it's impossible for them to be able to get solar panels on their building or have access to an electric car because they don't have a place that they could plug it in. I'd like to see us expand access to electrical outlets all across the state so that people who do have electric cars can plug them in somewhere. So I think it's really important for us to pay attention to this and to really work on this and to find ways to really green the economy so that we're creating hundreds of thousands of jobs based in the economy of the future and not what we've had in the past.
Thank you. Danny.
I think too often we split people on climate into 2 schools, the deniers and the people who believe it. And I like to say that we need to have a 3rd school. We need to have, well, we don't need to have the deniers, and then there's the people who believe it, and then there are the doers. Then there are people who actually are going to do something about climate change at the pace that we need to do it at, because this is not a political issue. This is science, and science tells us how fast we need to do it. And the pace that we need to do it is not very politically expedient, but we've done this in this country before. When we had World War II, we completely transformed our economy overnight when we needed to do it, and we can do it again. But it's going to be bold changes. It's going to be a ban on all new fossil fuel infrastructure in Massachusetts. We're ready for that. It's going to be a statewide building moratorium, that's right, except for public necessity, as I was speaking in housing, low-income housing, if you need a community center. But there's a lot of wasteful building going on in Massachusetts that is destroying the trees, which are supposed to be absorbing the carbon. So it's bold steps that we'll need to take, and we're going to need to take bold steps to pay for it as well, and it also is going to be having to confront the federal military budget, which needs to be cut dramatically, and a peace dividend needs to come back to help our communities.
I hear the passion. Our last question, only 1 minute, given our time frame. You both have aggressive policy goals. How do you plan to overcome the lack of political will to implement change to reach these goals? Danny?
So I think the political will is there from the people. I think that's the good news. I think the people are on our side. I think people don't want a future for our kids that is not just more floods and bad weather, but the droughts that climate change will cause as well, and the climate refugees that will come from the coast and make things very difficult for people inland as well. So the people want change. It's more that we just need to reform our political system. Too long we have just been used to the fact that we have 2 parties, both that are funded by corporations. I come from an independent party, which is the only national party that is not a corporate-run party. And I think once we get the money out and we get the interests out and the people are in charge, we will meet our goals as far as climate and as far as making a more healthy and sustainable economy as well.
Tammy?
So I've been campaigning really hard since February, and I've talked to thousands of people at their doorstep. And one of the things that I hear over and over and over again, whether I'm in Chelmsford, Concord, Carlisle, or Acton, is that people love living in this state. They're very concerned about what's happening at the national level, but people generally feel very grateful for what we have in Massachusetts, and that we are a state that generally invests in other people, and we see that our future is wrapped up in our neighbors' kids. And so I think that's a real strong foundation for us to work from, is the fact that we are a state that cares about other people and that we make strong investments in other people. And that we need to continue to move forward in order to be able to pay for some of the initiatives, is get back to the place where we look at things as a common good: transportation, a clean environment, safe and healthy neighborhoods for people to walk around in. Those are all things we need to thrive, and they're all things that are really important and an important common good for all of us to invest in. So that's what I will fight for as state representative.
Thank you. Nicely timed. We are down to our closing statements, beginning with Danny Factor. 1 minute.
So first of all, I very much want to thank the League for running this. I want to thank Tammy as well for being here as well. It's just been a real honor to be a candidate for this office. I think that we need to make changes. I think that most people want those changes. When people are polled, 60 to 70% of people say that they're dissatisfied with the two-party system. That's why a plurality of registered voters in Massachusetts are unenrolled. The way right now that the Democratic Party, which has 80% of the state house, runs the state house, is a terrible model of democracy. It should matter to us that the Massachusetts State House is run mostly as a private club, and we need to bring reformers in there to give us people, planet, and peace over profit. Thank you.
Nicely timed. Tammy Govea.
We're living in an era that is so perilous for so many people in our state and our nation, an era that brings daily news of corruption and abuses of power. We live in a time of propaganda and unfettered corporate influence, in a time where when women come forward to express experiences of sexual violence, we're oftentimes demeaned and ignored and mocked. We're in an era where constituents who call on their elected officials to pass policies to achieve racial justice, to preserve our planet, and to secure affordable health care are often told we're asking for too much. I'm running for office because I don't think we're asking for too much. I'm running to serve as your legislator because I believe we can leave a really strong legacy for our children and our future. We're a state that has come together time and again, and we've come together to be an unstoppable force for justice and democracy. The challenges we face are solvable, and as your state representative, I'm committed to bringing your voice to the process so that we can solve those problems together. I thank you all for being here tonight. I thank Danny, and I thank the League for this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to remind the audience to please go to the website informedvoterma.org, which is the League of Women Voters website, to learn about our positions on the ballot questions and to learn more about all of your candidates. Let's give them both a big hand.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask our next round of candidates to please come up.